We began to study the laws of tzitzis, and in Mitzvah Hashem, we'll try to get a little bit further, maybe even complete the laws of tzitzis here. And the Gemara quotes a Bracha in Masechta Menachos on Daf Mem Beis, and we don't know exactly how to read the Bracha. It could be that the Bracha is setting up two conditions for the size of a beggar, the minimum size of a beggar for the Chiv Tzitzis. The first condition is talis shakotan miskasibo rosho verubo, a talis which is large enough to cover most of the body and the head of a child. And we'll see what that means in terms of centimeters. And a second condition is that a gadol yotzi ba derech aroi, that a mature person would walk around in public wearing such a small beged. Again, he would only do it on a temporary basis, but nevertheless, he's not embarrassed. And the Tur in Orach Chaim Siman Tosnayin actually quotes two different minimum shiurim for a talis to be chayav in tzitzis. Number one, Katan ben Teisha Yeds, that it's a 9-year-old. Yachal Achasus Bo Rosho Verubo. And number two, V'gadol Eino Misbayesh Lotzeis Bo Bakroi L'Shuk. So if you're missing one of these two conditions, according to the Tur, either it's not enough to cover a 9-year-old boy, Rosho Verubo, or even if it is large enough, but a mature person would not walk around even on a temporary basis, on an occasional basis in the shuk with such a small beged, then if either of those two conditions are lacking or missing, then you're potter from tzitzis. Now, the Beis Yosef quotes another opinion, and that is the Mari Ibn Chaviv, who himself is basing his view on the Rambam that there's only one condition. And all you need is a beged that's large enough for a cotton to cover his head and most of his body. The mention here of a gadol is only a description of what goes on, meaning that because the beged has that minimum size of what a cotton would wear and cover most of his body and his head, therefore a gadol with that size of a beged would not be embarrassed to go out baroi. But we don't have a second condition here. And if you take a look at the Beis Yosef, which you'll see here on the bottom of page 69, in this choveret, Shir Talis Lischai B'tzitzis is Tanarabonan Talis Shakot Miskasib Rosh Veruba. And the Beis Yosef says that the intention of this price is to teach us that ma yaseh gadol hayotze bekroi b'talis ketana. What is the requirement if a gadol goes out wearing a beged that's very small? Is he obligated in tzitzis or is he not? And the answer is, if it has the size that a cotton could cover most of his body and his head, then he's chayav in tzitzis. But if, on the other hand, a cotton would not be able to cover most of his body and his head, then the gadol is allowed to wear such a small beged out in Rosh Hashanah without putting on tzitzis on it. And then he quotes the Tur, who seems to set up two different conditions. Now, of course, the Shulchan Aruch will always base himself on the Rambam. Therefore, in Siman Tezayin, it doesn't surprise us. It's exactly what we anticipated, that the Shir Vitalis for a Chiv Tzitzis is she is Kasebo Be'orech Uberochav Rosho Verubo Shal Katan. Okay, let's just think about Orech and Rochav. So the Orach is the length from the shoulder down to the end of the beged, and the rochav is the width of the beged from one side to the other. Now, Lamaisa with tzitzis, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to double the number of orach, because the orach is only 1/2 of the beged. That's the part of the beged that is in front, but you need an equal size beged in the back. But be that as it may, one thing is clear, that the Mechaber just simply paskins that the only minimum shear that we have to deal with is a katan being miskasebo rosh v'ruba. The Ramah, on the other hand, and this is something that we saw already in the tour, Oz chay b'tzitz badafka kshagadol lovesh pa'amim aroi v'yotzebo b'shuk. Even though, says the Ramah, you have the shear of katan yechasebo rosh v'ruba, that itself is not enough to generate a chiyuv tzitzis. You also need that the gadol will sometimes wear, on an occasional basis, this beged out in the shuk. He's not embarrassed about it. Now, if we want to get down to a little bit more, shall we say, practical brass tacks, what exactly is the size of a beged that a katan was be miskasebo rubo v'rosha? How large of a beged do you have to have? And here we get into a machlokas between Reb Chaim Noah and the Chazon Ish. Very classic machlokas about sizes and minimum shiurim. According to Reb Chaim Noah, all you would need is 3/4 of an amma, which is, in his calculation, 36 centimeters. I think I'm going to get myself a measuring thing, what we call here a meter. Okay, it's the advantage of being married to an interior designer. Okay. Okay, 36 centimeters. Not much. Now, again, you're going to need 36 going up and down, and then another 36 in the back. And the same thing is in the width, except in the width, it's, it doesn't expand the beged at all, really. But here, by doubling the 36, you'll expand the beged, so that if you would open the beged, it would be 36 times 2, which is 72, right? So
and we're not making a difference between a talis katan and a regular talis in this situation.
Yeah, well, we're talking about the smallest talis that you could wear, a beged that's so small that only a katan of 9.
Right, but we're saying that for a regular talis, this would be the size as well, or no?
Well, not necessarily. For that, we need to invoke Rabbi Yona's famous shita, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But right now, we're talking about a talis katan. Now we have the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish expands it to 45 centimeters. Okay, so let's try that. It's a little bit larger. So I'm going to take out my tzitzis. Don't be embarrassed. And let's see what we have over here. I'm wondering if I have the Chazon Ish, which we said is 45 centimeters.
Just saying that what the Rav said last week, it's a good thing it's the winter time that he's wearing his wool tzitzis. Otherwise, we'd have a problem with the Chazon Ish, no?
Yeah, that might be true. Guess what? I got just about 49 centimeters. So that's good news. I didn't realize that I was a Chazon Ishnik until now. Now he says, Shir zeh hu milvad nekev beis hatzavor. So I'm trying to figure out what he means by that. I mean, I know what the nekev beis hatzavor is. Let's see. Not sure what he means. Okay, now we're going to take a look at Rav Avadia Yosef, Lechatchila ein levarach al talis koten elam kein yesh bo kashir shtei amos. Again, shtei amos is not a problem because what he's doing is he's taking the shear and he's doubling it. Now, what is the shear of shtei amos? So again, he's talking about the orech. That means if you'd open up the talis cotton and stretch it out. He says it's 96 centimeters. All right, let's make a quick calculation here. 96 divided by 2 is, let's see, 4 times 2 is 8, is 48 centimeters. Not bad. We actually calculated 48 centimeters. So it sounds like Rav Yosef is going even beyond the Chazon Ish. And then he has Rochav, 48 centimeters. Okay then? And once again, he adds V'shir zehu milvad hanekev shel beis hatzavor. Oh, so here he adds something in the brackets. You should see this on the bottom of page 7. Do you have the pages? Oh, you don't know. Well, David was kind enough to send out the pages. Klomar shetzarch shir atalis ama milafanov, the ama milachorov. Okay, which we said is according to Rav Yosef, that's 48 and another 48. Milvad hanekev. The Chatzi Amma Mikol Tzad, the Rochav Atalis, She'al Kol Kotef. Ah, I see. He wants you to have 48 centimeters, which is exactly this amount, on each side. But what does that mean on each side? That can't be. Oh, he's got Chatzi Amma. So we said that an Amma was 48. So a Chatzi Amma will be 24. Am I correct? So he wants 24 centimeters on each side. From the neck. So again, for me to measure that, I'd have to actually take off my talus, which I'm not going to do right now. He says, "Aval pachas b'shir zeh, afal pisha yochol lilbosh ulekayim mitzvah tzitzis, but mikom makom lechatchil lo yevarech aleh." In other words, he wants to go beyond the letter of the law to make sure that we cover all the opinions and we have a vada and not a suffix, so we can make a bracha, and therefore he wants to have the 48 centimeters of width, which means 24 on each side, from the neck going to the right and to the left. Plus, he wants, if you would open up the beged, you would end up with 48 times 2 centimeters, which is 96 centimeters. Now he quotes the Piskei Teshuvos, and the Piskei Teshuvos is perfectly happy with the Shir of the Chazon Ish. And now we're up to page 71. Harotza lotzeis yedei kol adeos. Yakpid al orach v'rochav 58 by 58 centimeters milafanum. Where did he get 58 from? And we were talking about 42, 48, 45. I don't see where he get 58. What?
He had large children, Baruch Hashem.
I mean, 58 centimeters. Wow, that's a lot. Whoa. Are you wearing tzitzis this wide? 58 centimeters. That means it's got to be 58 centimeters here and in the back, of course. And what's he gonna require in the middle here? 60 al 60. Mikol tzad. I have a feeling that this is for more Hasidic kind of backgrounds. Don't know. Okay, we're on the bottom of page 71, and we're speaking about the fact that when you put on the tzitzis, you should be standing. And the Beis Yosef adds that while you're making the bracha on the tzitzis, you should likewise be standing. At what point in the morning should he put on his tzitzis while he's standing? Miyad achar netilas yadav, what we call negel vas. Now, how do we know that you have to stand when you do the Ituf on the tzitzis? Well, the truth is that's just an application of a universal rule that applies to all mitzvahs. And we derive that from Sfiras HaOmer, which requires standing, because the Torah says, Heichel Bakoma. And Bakoma, we interpret as Bakoma, meaning while you're standing. So that Sfiras HaOmer becomes the paradigm for all mitzvahs that require Amidah. The Rosh makes sure that we know that not only when you do the Ituf do you require Amidah, but even when you make the Bracha. Now, it could be that tzitzis actually becomes the paradigm for all mitzvahs, because tzitzis is equated to the Omer, meaning the counting of the Omer, and that's based on lachem lachem. It says vayal lachem letzitzis, and it says usfartem lachem. And in the context of this Gzera Shava, just as Sfiras HaOmer requires Amidah, because it says Me'echel chamesh bikoma, which we read as if it said bikima when he's standing, so too through this Gzera Shava, tzitzis, meaning Ituf, requires Amidah. And then from there, we're going to go on to all other mitzvahs. There's a general rule that Birchas HaMitzvos require Amidah. So certainly not only the Ituf requires Amidah, but the Bracha as well requires Amidah. And the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Ches is a little bit problematic because his language is Yisatef B'tzitzis v'Yavarech Me'umad. He only mentions Amidah for the Bracha. That's a bit strange. I'm going to get myself a Shulchan Aruch. I don't understand this language here. So the Mishnah Berurah writes, Yisatef b'tzitzis miyad achar netilas yadayim, kidei shelo yelech arba amos below tzitzis. Mi'umad. Oh, so I was medayik from the Lashon Shulchan Aruch that he only says me'umad by the bracha. He doesn't say Yisatef me'umad, but the Mishnah Berurah says that's an incorrect reading of the Shulchan Aruch. You read it the following way: Yisatef b'tzitzis v'yavarech, A plus B. Me'umad, and the word me'umad goes back to both Yisatef, and Yivarech. Ratzalomer, I'm reading the Mishnah Berurah. Sha'atifa ve'abrocha shteim ba'amida. Hatifa mishum t'ksiv lachem, v'alfin gzer shav mi omer, t'ksiv gam ki lachem, u'ba'omer ksiv me'achel chermesh ba'koma v'dashina ba'koma. Va'abrocha mishum t'kol birchas ha'mitzvos tzarech lios ba'amida. Yeah, he doesn't tell you why. He just says it's partial like that. Then he speaks about a case where he mistakenly forgot the bracha. He put on the tzitzis, and now he wants to know if he could make a bracha. So he says, "B'shashu ochazo biyado." That's when he should have made the bracha, even before he puts it on. That's called overlasiyasa. He should not make the bracha when the talis is still folded up. That's called over the over. It's too far removed from the act. For the bracha is too far removed from the actual ma'aseh mitzvah. Okay, then. I don't see an answer to our question about a b'diavad situation where he put on the talis and reminded himself afterwards that he has to make a bracha. But I'm pretty sure he can. Maybe we'll see it coming up. He writes here on the bottom of page 72, if he cannot stand, fine, it's only l'chatchila, he can make a bracha, and he could wrap himself in the talis in a sitting position. The nusach of the bracha on the talis, meaning the talis gadol, is lihis atef b'tzitzis. But what exactly is his atvus b'tzitzis? Does he have to cover his head, or is it enough that he covers his body? So what we're about to do now is we're going to postulate an equation between Avelus and Tzitzis. Because in Avelus, we find the original source for what's called Atifa, otherwise known in the Gemara's language as Atifas Yishmaelim. Is anybody else here, or just Joe is here? All right.
I'm here too.
Oh, David, you're here?
Yeah.
Wow, I can hardly see you. Oh, now I see you.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Bobby. I'm beginning to see people. Wow.
Yudi.
Yudi, I don't see.
I see him. Well, he's
you
name.
see him.
Not his picture. I see
You
him.
have better vision than I do. I don't see him.
That's possible.
He may be there. We don't know. We won't speak anything bad about him. Because like they say about Toronto, if you say any Lashon Hara about anybody, it's probably his cousin or something. Anyway, everybody, right? Everybody in Toronto is related somehow.
Basically.
I've even seen a mixed marriage between a Hungarian and a Polak in Toronto.
Only one.
Very rare, I mean. But anyway. Right. So now we're getting into the mitzvah of Atifa. And we're going to derive it from Atifas Yishmaelim in the case of an Avel, Rahman al-Islam. We don't have Atifa for an Avel. In the days of the Gemara, the Talmud, they had Atifas HaRosh, and that's how the Avel, when he came into Shul, they recognized that he was in an Avelus, and they would menachim him. So the Gaonim claim that just like in Avelus, Rahman al-Islam, you need Atifas Yishmaelim, so too in Talis, you need Atifas Yishmaelim. And the Gaonim identify Atifas Yishmaelim as Atifa Gemura, a total Atifa. Which means that he has to cover not only his body, but even his head. Apparently, that's what the Yishmaelim did. However, the Bala Itur, one of the great Rishonim, he says, no, you don't have to go that far. you should wear the beged the way a normal person wears a beged when he goes out, when he does his work, and so on and so on. It means he covers his body. He doesn't cover his head. So now Atifas Yishmaelim is Atifas Harosh, and he covers his head and his neck. Ad legova peh. Okay, so the top part of his body, he covers up to the peh, up to his mouth. According to the Gaonim, his atvus betalis has to include his head and his neck, because that's Atifas Yishmael. The Bala Iter, on the other hand, says no, he's got to cover his body. He doesn't have to cover his head. And the Beis Yosef understood that according to the Gaonim, we're going to learn from the equation between Atifas Yishmaelim in the case of Avelus to Atifa and Tzitzis, that also in Hilchos Tzitzik we need and require Atifas Yishmaelim against the Bala Iter. We're going to have to cover our head. Says the Beis Yosef, Seder Adifaso, this is all in Simon Ches, Pirshu HaGaonim, Katifas Yishmaelim She'atifa Gemura. Why? Okay, in the case of an Avel, that's the way he pravas Avelus, and his grief and mourning brings him to an Atifa Gemura. But who says that Tzitzis, which normally you wear as a beged, who covers his head with a beged, that requires Atifas Yishmaelim? And the answer to this question seems to be that we derive it from the bracha itself. The bracha doesn't say bracha Hashem al levishas tzitzis or al levishas talis. It says latov betalis or lisate betalis. What is the difference between levisha and ituf? And the answer is that ituf means ituf yishme'elim, to cover your head. Omar Shmuel in Moikot Chavdalid, Kol Atifa She'ena Katifas Yishmaelim Eina Atifa. He's talking about Avelus. Machvile Rav Nachman Ad Govei Dikne. It means that he has follicles, or what's called in Lashon Kodesh, it's called gumos halechi on the cheeks. And he should be covering his head all the way down to his mouth. That's what it comes out from the Gaonim, if you require Atifas Yishmaelim. But the Baal Iter says you don't need that. All you need is the way you normally dress. And the Gemara tells us in Perkei Megalchim regarding Avelus that Rav Polig Alei de Shmuel, he argues with Shmuel, meaning he holds that Atifas Arosh, Afal Pisha Eina Katifas Haishmeelu. You don't need an Atifa Gemura, says Rav. And for those who are with me, it's on page 74. Rabbeinu Agol Mari Abu of Zalkosav Shetaimo, the logic of the Bala Iter, the lo be'inan Atifas Yishmaelim el gabe Avelus. So we go back to the Bala Iter, who says that for Ituf and Talis, all you have to do is wrap your body around with the Talis, but not your head. And now we understand why. The Bala Iter understood that Avelus and Tzitzis are tzvei dinim, are two different concepts, and they should not be equated. So the Bala Iter is cholik on the Gaonim. He holds that you don't need for talis Ituf Atifas Yishmaelim. However, the halach is like Shmuel with regard to Avelus. That's where you need Atifas Yishmaelim. Now it's interesting because the Balaita assumes that even in an Avel situation, we're not going to paskel like Shmuel and require Atifas Yishmael. We're going to accept Rav's Shita. Now let's go back again and revisit Rav. Right, it says, Omar Shmuel, Kol Atifa she'ena k'atifas Yishmaelim, Eina Atifa. Shmuel completely excludes anything but Atifas Yishmaelim. So wait a second, where's Rav? I had it before, didn't I? Oh, there it is on the bottom of 73. He says here that Rav Polig de Shmuel. What does that mean? That you don't need Atifas Yishmaelim. So Atifas Yishmaelim, which Shmuel says has to come all the way down to your mouth, past the follicles on your cheeks, is not accepted l'halacha. Why? Because halacha kerab b'isure. And what we're dealing with now is called isure, because any mitzvah, and whether or not you yotze, like for example, tzitzis in our case, that's called isurim, and we're going to paskin like Rav. So we don't need and we don't require atifas yishmaelim. And that's according to the Bala Ituf. Now he quotes the Maria Buav that the halacha is like Rav, but Rav agrees to Shmuel that an Avel requires Atifas Harash. However, it was Shmuel who said that you need Atifa Gemura and you need Atifas Yishmaelim. So the Gaonim accepted Shmuel, and they require Atifa Gemura, Atifas Yishmaelim. It's got to come down his whole face. However, according to Maria Buav, everybody should agree that the halacha is like Rav. And an Avel is Chayiv and Atifas Harash. The whole machlokus is whether or not we can equate tzitzis to Avel. So the Gaonim say that the lashon of the bracha of lisativ but tzitzis is exactly the same hisatvus that we require in avelus. Now we get to the Baal Itur. The Baal Itur says, wait a minute, maybe his atvus of an Avel is going to require Yishmaelim all the way down, but not his atvus of a Talis. And therefore the Shulchan Aruch paskins that the halacha is like Baal Itur, and we don't need Atifas Harash. I'm sure that the minig is to do Atifas Harash. I've never seen anyone half in and half out. I don't know today, so many gradations, but did you ever see anyone who left out Atifas Harash and calls himself an Orthodox Jew?
I used to have a Rav who used to just bring it across. He would do the whole body and then just bring the talus across his eyes. Rav.
And he did not cover his head.
Did not wrap his entire head. He just brought it.
So I guess for some reason he paskins like the Itur, which is like, it seems like that's the halacha. The Shulchan Aruch writes, "Say that atifasu kederech b'nei adam shemiskaskim v'kesusam v'oskim v'malachta." But let's look that up here. We have it right here in front of us. Seder atifasu kederech b'nei adam shemiskaskim v'kesusam v'oskim v'malachtam pa'am v'kisi harash pa'am v'gili harash. So therefore, gili harash is enough. I mean, the bracha is lisate. I guess covering the body is called ituf. Oh, but then the Shulchan Aruch writes, "V'nachon sheyichasa rosho b'talis." Why is that? Interesting. I'm not sure where the Mishnah Berurah is coming from, but maybe he's putting together two statements of the Beis Yosef. On the one hand, the Beis Yosef says that you don't need to cover your head. Just Kisei HaGuf should be enough. And he's pasking like the Balei Ituf. But on the other hand, he says, Nachon sheyichasa rosha. So the answer lies in another Beis Yosef. The Beis Yosef writes that Kisei HaRosh, if you cover your head with the talis, machnia lev ha'adam umevio lidei yiras shamayim. Okay. And another interesting discussion in Mishnah Berurah whether you have to wear yarmulke if you do atifas harosh. Okay. So again, his atvus means to cover your body, not necessarily your head. If you would cover your head and not your body, you would not be yotze. That's not called ituf. And the nusach habracha lisatef means covering your body. Lisatef means ituf haguf. And then he quotes the Mishnah Berurah here that we just saw on page 75. Kisei zeh machnia halev lev adam u'mevil lidei yiras shamayim. This is actually the starting point for an equation between, not an equation, I don't know, we're an overlap, if you will, between tzitzis and tefillin, because they both generate an atmosphere, a mood of yiras shamayim. Kosav Bach, tzorch she'eh talis al rosho, mitchilas hatfila ad sofa. What does that mean? Let's just see if the Mishnah Berurah explains this at all. All right. Kosav Bach, I'm reading the Mishnah Berurah Dalet. It's tzarich she'eh talis al rosho mitchilas hatfila v'ad sofa. V'al kol panim yamod kein me'utov lefachos kedei hiluch dalet amos. I don't know what he means. Perhaps, according to the Bach, Psukei de Zimra is part of Tefillah. It's not just what we call like an introduction to Tefillah. He seems to want to put the Talis Ibn cup from the entire beginning, from the Tefillah till the end. I assume the same would apply during Chazor Sashatz. I don't know. He doesn't give you a clue. But he does quote Rav Avadia here on page 75. Liachar shenesati b'talis kolo b'shas habrocha v'kisa bos rosha v'achach rido al gufo rashoylo rido al ksefo b'zman atfilo u'mikol makom nachon lechasos rosh harosh b'talis ad sof atfilo. funny that he says ad sofa tefillah. I thought he would say mitchilas atfillah v'ad sofa. Nachon lechasos harosh bitalis ad sofa tefillah. When does tefillah begin? That's what I'm trying to rack my brains. Is it Birchas HaShachar? Is it Karbonos? Is it Psukei Zimra? Is it Yotzam Oros? Birchas Kriyat Shema? Is it Shema? At what point do you call it Tchilas HaTefillah? I mean, this is a very relevant question on a daily basis. You know, when do you have to keep your talis on top of your head? Again, I'm not saying you have to, but he's saying Nachon. He writes, Yesh noagim latofes rosha mi birchas yotzer or v'elech. I'm not so familiar with that minig. I'm more familiar with the minig that from Yishtabach he covers his head. L'kras kabbalah sol malchus shemayim b'kriyat shema. So birchas kriyat shema is the introduction to kriyat shema. The sedgeway, I guess you could say, to kriyat shema. V'rabim noagim latofes rosham b'tfilas shmona esrei v'chein roy linog. And we've been going a step further and saying it's nachon that you should cover your head the entire tefillah. He's saying during shmona esrei, like as if he was machadish something. Yesh l'tzayin shel minig teiman. Yesh l'satei v'talis kasher kol ha'knofos nimtzos mikadim. He wants, at the time of the Ituf, that all four corners should be in front of you. I don't get that too well. I always understood, and I think the Gaon says it explicitly, that tzitzis requires two in front and two in the back. So now we're up to page 76. Derech Atifa Machzir Beis Tzitzios Lefonov, Beis Tzitzios Lachorov, not like the minig of Teiman. Shemesuvav b'mitzvos. Umechasa Rosho Shelo Yeh B'Gilui Rosh. I guess the chiddush here is that even though you're putting the talis over your head, nevertheless, you should still make sure that your head is covered. Now, my impression is that while he's holding the talis, he hasn't yet actually wrapped his body around the talis. He should recite the bracha lis'ativ b'tzitzis. Again, so it sounds like from all the poskim Mikra Din, Ituf is Ituf HaGuf. However, the minig was accepted to do Ituf HaRosh. Minig Yisrael midorei doros lasos hatifas yishmeim leachar bracha latalis ubekisvei harizal hisbir shenochon aminig miod ubazeh yotzim shitas hagaonim shetzorach hatifa gemura atifas yishmeil. And if you're trying to fulfill the shitas Hagaonim Vatifas Yishmaelim, then Hazman, the minimum amount of time that you should be covering your head is Kashir Hiluf Dalad Amos. Not a very long time. But Kosvu Achronim Lasas Atifas Yishmaelim Zuka Hogen, Dainu Shachelik Elyon Shalatalis Mechaser Rosho. Umitzcho ad lamala mihainayim. What does this mean? Chelik ha'elyon shalatalis. What does that mean, Rabbi? Chelik ha'elyon shalatalis. Is he talking about an Atorah? He has the Atorah on his top. How do you know which is the Chelik Elyon of the talis? Is there a secret password here? Chelik Elyon shel talis. I have a feeling he's talking about the length of the talis, but which is the Elyon and which is the Tachton? Is there a way of knowing that? I mean, in Talis Katan, I can figure that out maybe because, you have the Savar for the Rosh, so that the place where the Savar is, that would be called the Elyon, I guess. But in case of a Talis Gadol, which he's talking about a Talis Gadol now for Ituf purposes, what is the Chelik Elyon?
Why wouldn't it be the top half? Like when you're looking at it, because that's what you have to put over your head, and then you wrap the rest of it around you.
But tell me, Bobby, how do you know which is the top? In other words, they put on this and they put on that, but isn't that like arbitrary? Like, let's say.
No, yeah, it's whatever you decide it's going to be. Like you can change it every day.
You're not supposed to change it. Once you figure that
it doesn't seem, Bobby, like
top,
he's willing to change it, because look, he writes here that a chelika elyon shalatalis mechasa rosha. I mean, he's going to change it every day. I don't know. And then he writes hachelika achori shalatalis yichases rova gav. Okay, so he's behind his back. He's going to cover most of his back. Now he says makabes lefanov es dalid knofos. Umashlichan lachorov. So I have a feeling what he means is that initially at stage one, he takes two ends out of the four of his talus on one side. And then he wraps the other side in front of him, and now he's holding on to all four corners. Umekabetz lefanov, he gathers together the four corners. Umashlicha lachorov, and he puts it over the left side, he says. Umisatef bechelik hatachton shel hatalis. What does that mean? He went from the chelik elyon, now he's on the chelik hatachton. Umisatef bechelik hatachton shel hatalis. No, I'm sorry. I apologize. I just don't have it. I'm finding that there's like a gap between the written word and the reality and the picture of what it really has to be. I'm going to read it one more time, and then I won't bother you anymore with this. I'm just trying to work this out in my mind because there's something we do every day. It'd be nice if we did it the right way. He says the following. Hachelek ha'elyon shel hatalis mechasa rosho. Okay? So again, we have machlokas achron here. Bobby says that could be changed every day. You don't know which is the Chelik Elyon. You decide which is the Chelik Elyon. I mean, he seems to be prescribing that it be the Chelik Elyon. I don't know. Let's say
Well,
that you have an
normally you do have
akara.
some kind of indication.
Is somebody talking here?
Normally you have
Oh, Bobby's talking.
normally you have some indication of what the top is, of even, some kind of an Torah.
Right, and that Torah,
so
or
normally,
sometimes they put the, there's an extra strip that they sew on that has the bracha on. I don't know, they're different things. Ha'chelik ha'elyon shalatalis mechase rosho. Okay, so he puts that over his head. Umitzcho, and he covers his forehead. Ad lamala meheinayin. He doesn't want to cover the eyes. It's interesting because we saw before that there was a different definition of Ituf, which had it down to his mouth. Maybe that's only for an oven. I don't know. But he doesn't want to cover his eyes. A lot of people cover their eyes. Probably I do it half the time as well. Maybe because isam also, if you're covering your eyes, then it's in a funny kind of paradoxical way, you're undermining the whole mitzvah of tzitzis. So it's ad l'malam einayim. Now we get to the chelek ha'achori shalatalis. Which again, I guess is, what you've done so far is that you covered your head with the talis, but you still have most of the talis behind you. And that's called the chelek hachori shalatalis, because again, that which is going over the head is the forward part of the talis. That which remains covering the back is the back part of your talis, which is called chelek hachori shalatalis. Yechases rov hagav. I'm just trying to think in my mind. Joe, you asked me before, what's the minimum size of a talis gadol? We haven't even seen any answer to that question. But from this, I derive a conclusion that the talis gadol is got to be wide enough. I'm not talking about long, but wide enough that when you cover your head with the chelek elyon, then the me'achorei agav will cover most of your back. Okay, then. Umekabetz lefonav es dalet haknafos. Okay, now we're up to the two sides, so to speak. In other words, the length of the talis, as opposed to the middle size of the talis that's going here and going there. But now we're talking about the length of the talis. And he wants to gather together the four knafos. Okay, gathers them together. Mashlichan lachor me'aksefa hasmolis, so he throws it over his left side. Umisatev bechelek hatachton shalatalis. Okay, so in other words, in stage number one, he had the chelek elyon as an ituf. Now he wants to get the chelek hatachton involved in the ituf. Umisatef bechelek hatachton shalatalis lefanav. Oh, this is tricky. He's got the chelek hatachton going over lefanav. Bi ofen shemachazes hachaze ulamala ad hachotem. Whoa, I never did this. The chelek hatachton is now lefanav. He threw the tzitzis, the four knafos, behind him in the left. And now he's doing what seems to be another ituf, because he already mentioned the ituf at the beginning, when he said the chelek elyon is machase rosho. So that was ituf until his eyes. Now he's got another ituf. Bechelek hatachton shalatalis lefanav. Be ofen shemachases hachaze lemala arachoter. I guess he's holding on to the talis. So he's holding on, right? He already threw the Dalit Knafos over his left shoulder. And now the bottom part of his talus, wait, how does he get the bottom part of his talus over his chest? 1 second, I still don't get it down pat. Bottom part of his talus is covering his chest. I guess maybe he frees one of his hands. I'm just trying to work out the mechanics here, the logistics. Right? He threw it over. Now, one of his hands is free. I guess, yeah, it's going to have to be, I think, his right hand that's free. His left hand is holding the 4 knafos over its left shoulder. Or maybe he already let go of the knafos. I don't know. And now he takes the bottom part of his talus. How does he get to his chaz? I guess he maybe from the side, he kind of pulls both sides over his chest, covering his mouth. Not only covering his mouth, he's covering his nose. Whoa. Sounds like Kriyas Yamsuf here with Nachshon ben Aminadab. Nimsa shekol chelek gufo ha'elyon, the top part of his body, which is the chest and all the way up to his nose. Utstade panav upiv umechso mechusim betalos. My gosh. Every part of his body is covered by the talus, except for his eyes. Because even if he reaches his chotem, but he never covered it on top past the eyes. Sounds like the Arabian Nights over here. Wow. This is not my minhag. I don't know, maybe you know someone who does this. I don't know anyone. I mean, I think I know where he's coming from. I don't know exactly how he pulls it off logistically, but he's trying to get to the point where the entire body is covered by the talus. So it's very nice that he put the talus and pulled it over his head. So let's say he's covered most of his head or part of his head, actually the metzach of his head. But what about the front part of his body? He never actually covered the front part of his body. I mean, again, he did pick up the 4 knafos, but he threw him over his left side, so he never really covered his body. Nimtza shekol chelek gufo ha'elyon, which is the chest.
When he throws the 4 over his body, he's wrapped it all together. So when he throws it over, everything's covered. The tzitzit are, it's taking the beged.
Is he covering his face?
Just the face is not covered. He's
yeah, but he says he has to cover his face up until his nose with the chelik hatachton. Shemechase es hachazeh u'lamal arachote nimtza shekol chelik gufo ha'elyon u'tztadei panav u'piv u'mitzcho. Wow. Everything in his body has been covered. Mechusim v'talos, rak einayim megulos, only his eyes are uncovered. V'chein yamod l'chol pachos shir alichas daled amos. So, Joe, maybe what you said is right. When he's wrapping himself around the talus, he's already covering his nose, or he's covering his whole body up to his nose.
Why isn't it just this? First, he puts it like this.
Up
so
to his eyes.
Covering here.
And that's the chelik elyon, what you're holding now.
Yeah. Then you wrap your whole body like this, but you gather together all the tzitzis. So when I have the 4 tzitzis like this, and I go like this, I put it all the way up.
Yeah, but keep in mind, Bob, I don't know if it's simultaneous, but at one point you have to cover your chest.
Yeah, you just lost
And
your
you also
chest there.
You also have to cover up to your nose. I mean, I don't know if that's a 2-stage process. Maybe as he's gathering together the 4 corners, he's already covering his chest.
Right.
Now, why is that called the chelik hatachton?
Well, in other words, it's all this is the tachton. This is the part that's on your head is the elyon.
Oh, the tachton is that which flows down in front of him?
In
All
other
right.
words, everything.
That's not a bad idea, maybe. And then while he's throwing it over his left side, he's covering his chest. And at what point does he cover up to his nose? I'm trying to figure that out exactly.
Yeah, that's a little difficult, that part.
Yeah, the problem is that the Maggid Shir of the Daf Yomi in the morning took too long. I had no time just even to put on my tefillin, let alone to wrap my.
I'm sorry. According to my clock, Joe, the Maggid Shir of the Daf Yomi went overtime by 3 minutes.
Right.
If I'm right that it's a 55-minute shir. I have to go back to an email that I got from a friend of mine who does Ituf, very fancy Ituf. And I think my friend wrote to me that, with the exception of Sunday, where I get another 15 minutes, every day of the week it's 55 minutes. So maybe I made a mistake in that, and I didn't.
I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying the ability to.
3 minutes. That's the 3 minutes that Joe is missing.
It's okay.
Okay,
No,
I'll have you know that I
wonderful.
had to cut my previous shir off, and I didn't eat lunch. But you don't have to give me any credit for that. That's okay.
I'm giving you all the credit. All the credit. But
All
we
right, I
gotta
just
stop.
want to finish page 76, which is one more paragraph. He says, "V'elu anogim l'shalshel chelik ha'elyon shel hatalis al piem." Oh, what about people who, when they put the talis over in cup, they bring it down to their mouth? I don't think he's going to like that. Let's see. Elu anogim l'shalshel chelik ha'elyon shel hatalis al piem ad piem. Gam ken yesh lehem al ma'al lismo. He's not bothered by that. Aval ha'mishalshel im hatalis ad ha'chazeh. Oh, that's not a bad idea. If you're already covering it all the way down to your mouth, then why not go a little further and cover your chest so you'll cover that part of your body? Umastirim pneim legamri. Their face is completely covered by the talis. Lav shapir, and that I don't tolerate. The ein zeh atifas yishme'il. So again, if you cover your talis the right way, the way he wants it, it's up until your eyes. If you go further and cover up until your mouth, yesh al mi lismo. But to go beyond the mouth and cover your chin all the way up to your chest, that's not atifas yishme'il. So how do you cover your chest? The chelik hatachton of the talis. Yeah, we're not exactly sure. Maybe he means while you're wrapping it around, but somehow, since he only covered his metzach when he put the talis in cup, and we want to cover every part of the face with the exception of the eyes, he's going to have to somehow, with the bottom part of his talis, cover up to his nose, including his nose, like Nachshon ben Aminod. Okay, Rabbosai, we have now a summary on page 77 of pretty much everything we learned. Remind me, did we finish our discussion about synthetic materials for talis? I don't remember. Did we finish that? I remember starting it.
We discussed it.
All right, let's see if we can figure out if I finished it or not. We mentioned the Chazon Ish, who advocates during the summer months not using beged shel tzemer, but nevertheless the Chazon Ish did not wear synthetic garments like polyester, but rather he wore cotton. And the question is, what's the status of manufacture? Oh, wait a minute. I meant to discuss with you, but I don't think we got around to it. The issue of weaving the chutim in order to create a garment, and whether or not tviyah is a precondition in the beged shechayev bo tzitzis. So in case we didn't do that, I would like to talk about that. And then bli neder to talk about tcheles. And with that, we could conclude our discussion. David, if you're still here, then my question to you is, did you reach page 92 in the photocopies? Would you happen to know the answer?
Which 92 are we talking about?
The
internal
one that I
page
sent
or-
you, it was this morning on my clock and in the night at your clock.
Oh, yeah, I saw that, but I have to check. I'm not sure.
Yeah, see if you got up to page 92. And if not, I'll make it up, the difference. So by next week, we'll have completed our discussion of tefillin and of tzitzis. And now I want you to give some thought as to where we should go from there. He has a discussion here about Netilas Yadayim. I think I heard parts of it from Rav Weber when I was in Clanton Park. And from my perspective, it's time to move on to Hilchos Shabbos. And I'll tell you what really confuses me the most about Shabbos is Borer, Meleches Borer. I still can't get it, clear. And there's so many issues about Borer that keep coming up. But again, I'm not trying to persuade you. I'm just trying to influence you.
Whichever way the Rav wants to go, we're here.
Yeah,
for
but
it.
I'd like to get a little bit of feedback. I see Rabbi Planka has joined us. We were looking for you before. We didn't see you, but now we think we see you. Although, with Zoom, you never know if you're looking at a real face or just a picture. It's like hard to tell. But that looks really very realistic.
It's real.
Oh, it's real. Okay. You see it till the mummy moves his lips. You don't know if he's alive or not.
Okay,
All right.
thank
So
you, Rav.
I'll take this opportunity to thank you so much for coming. Some of you are really gluttons for punishment. You heard me twice already today.
As much as we can.
Call to.
Call to. Thank you.